As a criminal defense attorney, you know that hundreds of good people are being arrested every single day. And these people want answers. They want to know that there's a firm out there that they can trust. How do we make sure that these people can actually find you? Well, after someone's been arrested, we know that they're most likely going to go to the internet to try to find the answers that they crave most. They might just search for the best firm in the area. They might read a couple articles or watch a couple videos about their specific need. But regardless of what that customer journey is, one thing is very clear. Without the correct online marketing strategy, your firm is virtually invisible online. And that's why you need Scorpion. Scorpion is the only digital marketing agency that has a team dedicated to criminal defense attorneys. We're actually also NACDL's only affiliate online marketing partner for all their members nationwide. So if you're looking for answers on how you can get in front of more of your ideal clients and cases online, don't hesitate to reach out. Reach out to myself, Nathan Reynolds here at Scorpion, or anyone else on the team, and we'd be happy to talk about what we can do to help you out. Enjoy the webinar, and we look forward to talking with you.
NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
Hi, my name is Tamara Brady, and this is David Wymore.
Hello, folks.
We are taping here in Colorado during the 2020 pandemic. We're going to talk to you today about the Colorado method of capital jury selection.
Yes, we are, and it's a little bit strange for us to talk into a screen, so bear with us, because normally I like to stare at people and then kind of see how we're doing on this whole thing, but now I'm just looking at a blank screen. So why don't we get started? I want to talk to you a little bit about how we normally teach this program, which is the National College of Capital Voir Dire, nccvd.org, and go to the Voir Dire section and not the venereal disease section on the .org. It's a 3-day seminar. We had to cancel it this year. We are not a real organization. We're just a bunch of lawyers and some volunteers that put our annual seminar on in Boulder. And we just can't handle all the other stuff. So, because that's not what we do. But hopefully next year, God willing, and everything else, we'll be able to run our seminar. We usually go online for the applications in October, November. It's held in May, in the middle of May, when right after CU graduates. That's University of Colorado. It's in Boulder, Colorado. It's a 3-day seminar where you do intense practice on every section that Tammy and I are going to kind of skate through today to give you an introduction or just kind of an outline of what it is. Obviously, listening to this and then going out and practicing capital voir dire, just don't write down that you are trained in the Colorado method, and avoid me having to come down and say you're not. Okay, so it needs a lot of practice. This is just trying to understand the concepts and how we do it, and then we will kind of go through the sections of how we do it, and then hopefully you'll be able to attend the college, practice intensely, and then get in and keep pursuing our goal to defeat death cases across the United States.
If you're new to this method, I can't stress enough what David said, how important it is to actually practice the method, because you can listen to us talk about it and you're like, all right, well, I think I can do that. Good, let's go. And it's a completely different thing when you stand up and try and do it. And we've been doing this college for 15-ish years. And when I hear the lectures and when I'm in Boulder in May, I still hear things that are new to me and think of ways to improve the jury selection that I've done. And so it's not like you can listen to this lecture and you're ready to go. It really is a process of learning it. One other thing I'll say before we really get started is we'll say a lot of things, concepts many times, and that's because we want the language that we're using to become secondary to you, to be able to use this language naturally and automatically when you talk about capital juries, because you want to integrate these concepts through your entire trial, not just jury selection, but you want to remind the jurors who are chosen of these concepts in sentencing, in the closings, in jury instructions. Anytime you get to talk to the jury, you should be reinforcing these concepts. And so you'll hear us talk about the theories over and over, hopefully, so they'll sink in for all of us. Good?
All right, is that your part?
That's my introduction.
All right, so let's get down to it. You know, basically, and getting back to Tammy's, you can watch guys fly off the edge of a cliff in a squirrel suit, and you don't go, hold my beer, that looks easy, right? This is not easy. It's a very nuanced, and your listening capacities and your ability to formulate and structure and persist in the questions of what you're doing, and not just give up and go to compromise is important here. So let's talk about traditional capital voir dire. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So my understanding, and Dave can correct me because he was there, but when this method was being developed, it came in part as a result of trying to do things and learning that it wasn't working. So, for example, if you ask a juror, what do you think about the death penalty? They'll often respond, well, it depends. Depends on what? Well, it depends on, did the person kill someone? Well, yes, they killed someone. Well, maybe it was in self-defense. Well, if it was in self-defense, then we wouldn't be considering sentencing because that's a defense. Well, were they protecting their child? Well, that would be defense of others. And so the conversation quickly sunk into the quicksand, and all of the time available was consumed with trying to get the juror to understand what first-degree murder is, and then to talk to them about their thoughts on the death penalty. And so David and the other people who helped design this program tried to come up with a quick and efficient way to talk to jurors about the concepts of life in prison without parole and the death penalty. And this is what they came up with. We often tell people, if you use this method, we're not guaranteeing that you'll get a life verdict. I mean, nothing can guarantee ever that you will get a life verdict, but what we say is that it structures the way you pick the jury, and it gives you the best chance, in our opinion, the best chance of finding a juror or jurors who are going to vote for a life sentence. And so the method is designed to be quick and efficient, and that's why some of the language, we use the same language over and over and over with each juror that we speak to, because words are chosen carefully. The chronology in which we do it is chosen carefully, and so that's how we came up with it.
So let's talk a little bit about traditional capital voir dire, which is you got to understand and believe that the judge and the DA want to have a quick and inclusive voir dire where all the good old boys, and all the good old gals get to be on the jury, because everybody down at the country club and over at the DA's office really consider themselves fair, and everybody else they know is fair too. They don't support the death penalty in every instance, just in some, i.e. your guy, okay? So traditional capital voir dire kind of is open-ended, and it's open-ended with the intent to to keep it inclusive so that they're listening to, the judge wants to hear the answer of, well, not in all cases, but in some cases, or it would depend. And usually what it depends on is like you not being guilty, you not being anywhere near the scene of the crime, you not being black, you not being a meth head, you not being your client, okay? Because in the event that it's your client, well, then it's the automatic death penalty. But the traditional voir dire sounds like this. Will you be fair in deciding to give the death penalty or the life penalty in this case? Yeah, I'll be fair. You're guilty, you get the death penalty. Is that's fair? That's fair. Okay. Then they'll bust down to, can you sit and listen to both sides or to mitigation? Oh yeah, I can listen. It's absolute bullshit, but I can listen. And I think that the Oklahoma versus Ross said you have to value mitigation. So they have these fake tests. The fake test is, that you won't attack anybody during the jury won't attack anybody during the penalty phase for having to be made to listen to it. I mean, I can sit and listen to Donald J. Trump, but I don't value what he says, and I haven't attacked the TV. I know that's just kind of a bad example, but that's where I'm at. You follow me on that? So, and the jurors say, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And that's what they want to do, is get this repertoire of inclusiveness. So our voir dire basically deals, and I was thinking about this the other day. It kind of goes two ways. We attack on Morgan. And if you don't know Illinois versus Morgan, I need you to read it carefully and don't pretend you're a capital lawyer unless you know Illinois versus Morgan or Morgan versus Illinois. I'm not big on those, but I know the two names. I know that there's an Illinois,
Morgan.
Mr. Illinois and Mr. Morgan were fighting this out. But at any rate, it had those two fellers in it. And it basically, we attack. So we are challenging. We're developing the Morgan challenge to get automatic death penalty, or what we call sevens, off the jury. So we push on whether or not they can follow or are excludable under Morgan, and then then we try to understand if they can follow the law on Maryland versus Mills and Lockett and the state of Colorado and your state that says one juror, or basically, can you follow the law that that any vote for life means a non-unanimous vote for death and therefore no death penalty. So you're trying to exclude on Morgan and then understand if you can follow. But whenever you ask anybody, can they follow the law, then you're into their voir dire, right? So we change follow the law to you have rights to not follow the law. You basically have a right to determine mitigation for yourself. We call it rights instead of follow the law. We say, you understand you have a right to find your own mitigation? Do you understand that's the law? Yeah, so we attach a right and a law. Does that make sense there, Tammy?
It does, David. It does,
okay.
David.
Okay, so why traditional voir dire doesn't work is because of sociological studies that were done during the time of the attacks to before we started separating in 78 under Witherspoon, where they wanted separate juries to determine guilt and penalty and exclude the Witherspoon exclude people that would never consider the death penalty, right? So we have to get rid of what we call these weak-kneed, liberals, right?
Right.
The guys in VWs, the bug with the flower, right? It has the flower and the peace sign. They gotta go. Gotta go. So Haney and a bunch of sociologists and just brilliant people did a study on it. And what is the problem? And they attacked it from, well, what's the problem with saying the death penalty? And what it is they call it death qualification. So, and it's death processing, and I believe it totally because of my sociology degree. Thank God. So anyway, what happens, and it's true when you do it, when you sit there and tell a juror, look, we have a death penalty case here, and the jurors, what they hear is, it's like your dog, blah, 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 and they hear their name or biscuit or walk, right? They know 3 words. And I'm not saying jurors are like dogs, but I'm saying, processing is the same way as the whole thing. So the jurors are in there like, oh shit, I'm in here I came down to the courthouse. I wonder what it is. Oh, murder. Oh, death penalty. And you got, a guy in a black robe and a bunch of people in dark suits. And they're saying, this is not only a murder case, but we're going to ask you to give him the death penalty. And what they're hearing is blah, blah, blah. Can I nut up and give this guy the death penalty? The presentation or death qualification is telling them, we qualified this. This is different than everything else. Judges qualified it, DAs qualified it, lawyers are in on it, community's in on it. It's your standard, we can't lynch him, okay. We can't just take him out and shoot him, okay. We got to give him a fair trial and then a quick hanging. That's the whole. And can you nut up and get over everything you got and kill this guy? That's called death processing. It says the judge and the attorney are there by dwelling on the penalty, presumed guilt with death as the appropriate penalty, because they ask you to hypothetically put yourself in the position that you've already convicted a guy of first-degree murder. Now, they'll never tell you what first-degree murder is, because that makes a little, and he calls it butchering hogs. The more you butcher hogs, the less you're upset about butchering hogs. So, they keep talking about it's death desensitization. You imagine a death verdict. It makes it more conceptually possible. You have to get over, well, I don't know. I've been down there in, church every day and, love the brother and, all that, and thou shalt not kill. They got to bring you over that. They have to make it as, they do all that crazy religious stuff. But, the recent one I saw was that the jurors had to get together and pray. So somehow God comes down and says, okay, killing this guy's okay, is a good thing. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not much on the religious base, but I don't believe God or Jesus ever tells anybody it's okay to kill anybody. But somehow that comes up. So the more you imagine it, the more it makes it possible. And a feeling of judicial approval towards people who cannot say, I'm really hesitant about the death penalty. So you get they just attack you, because that's what the ex-DAs who are now judges, and what the judges think they have to do. Don't forget, judges think that they own the jury, right? Mm-hmm. That's my jury. I'm my jury. I got my jury out, It's not your goddamn jury. It's a client's jury, right? Mm-hmm. But, I got my jury out, and they love to direct and try and move the jury to their position. Well, you know what, Judge? Maybe I ought to get off the goddamn bench, get down here with old cousin Dave, and we'll see how that goes, right, Tammy?
Right, Dave.
So the processing effect presumes your client is guilty, presumes the death penalty will occur, presumes the death verdict is required, and that's very critical, because jurors they'll interview them afterwards, like Sunby and these guys will interview them afterwards. Oh, I thought the death penalty was required. Oh yeah, well, I thought once, and it's like, nice lawyering right there. So, and all the steps are a mere formality. You just have to listen and be nice. Can you be nice, even though, can you be nice during this whole? I know. Just be nice.
So the jurors think that we're just going through the motions, that they've been called in, that the judge, the lawyers, that everyone knows this is going to be a death penalty case. They keep calling it a death penalty case. All we talk about is the death penalty. This must be a death penalty case.
Not life penalty case?
The judge is going to be mad if I can't impose the death penalty. So we all just need to go through the motions and give this guy the death penalty. And that's the processing effect, is talking about it in particular language, in particular way, until they believe it's a death penalty case. I just have to check a few boxes. The guy gets the death penalty and we're done. And unless we, as capital defenders, change that processing effect, that's what happens.
It happens in 5 minutes. The studies, they can death process a jury in 5 minutes just by the introduction and blah, 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 reading charges, and we're seeking the death penalty, and I'm going to be questioning you all about your ability to listen and return a death verdict. That's death processing. And the jurors are like, okay. So what happened is, in the early 80s, seeing that opinion and seeing that happen and reading these studies, I thought, well, what if I tell them, well, wait a minute. I just get up and say you never have to kill anybody. You have a right to now give the death penalty. Any one juror can choose life. And it was like, like somebody just blew up the Twin Towers. What? Yeah. I mean, yeah, evidently that was an illegal concept. What a radical. This guy must be from Wyoming, So wacky shit like that. So, and it had an incredible impact on the jury. So, just telling them, and I didn't call it the law, I called it their rights. I said, you have the Juror Bill of Rights. In the death penalty cases, you have a right to choose life and give life for whatever reason you want, regardless of what everybody else thinks, which I now call the 11 holdouts for death. So that was kind of how it happened. All right. So just, so we life process too. We life process killers. And after we attack them or suggest that they are what they are, which automatic death, because that's just Morgan. After we do a Morgan attack, then we see how they fare on being a life juror and how they fare on following the constitutional dictates of mitigation and one vote for life and the law of state of Colorado, or whatever state you may be in, concerning unanimity as to the verdict of death. All right, so why don't we talk a little bit about problems with mitigation, what jurors hear?
So, obviously one of our main goals is to compile mitigation and present that to the jury, because that is how they get to a life sentence. And it is, I don't have to tell any of you, but that is an uphill battle to convince jurors that mitigation is valuable and worthy of a life sentence. And a study was done, where they asked jurors, do you think the following things are mitigating or should reduce someone's moral culpability in a murder? And the results were just astonishing and eye-opening. How many people don't believe in what we feel are concepts of mitigation? I think the best example is probably drug addiction and drug abuse. In Colorado, before we abolished the death penalty, in Colorado, drug addiction was a statutory mitigator. So the juror had to be able to give value and effect to drug addiction as a reason for a life sentence.
Wait, you said value and effect?
Value and effect. I chose those words carefully, Dave. I did.
You are smoking hot today.
And so what we learn in these studies is that people actually don't value drug addiction as mitigation. In fact, they like to flip it into aggravation. And so, things like drug addiction, alcoholism, extreme poverty, no prior criminal record, being seriously abused as a child, history of mental illness or developmental disability, there are a significant number of people who don't think those things are mitigating.
They think they're aggravating.
So instead of using serious abuse or mental illness as a reason to impose a life sentence, they will actually use it as a reason to impose a death sentence. And so unless we identify who those jurors are and politely or less politely excuse them from the jury, they're going to be deliberating sentence and they're not going to value your mitigation. So part of the method that we're talking about today helps to identify the people who will not give value and effect to our mitigation, and then we need to challenge and excuse them.
So, and the way this looks is if you let a 7, an ADP on our rating scale, we do 1, our people never give the death penalty, 7, they always give the death penalty. You let 7s and 6s sit on your jury, and you start running your mitigation up, and you sit there and tell me, yeah, I know, but I got a really good mitigation package. They think you're absolutely crazy. They think you are just doing nothing but wasting their time. They're irritated to hear it, and they just hate you for it, okay? So if you cannot quit, you cannot give up. It's, oh, I know he's a bad one, but, mom's going to come in. I really got this great guy. They don't give a shit. You're just irritating these people. You're irritating them, and they think you're begging. They think that you're just running, you're just putting on nonsense. He's guilty. We found him guilty. What are you doing? Because he exercised his free will. And they're free willers. 7s are free willers. That doesn't matter if anything happened. If, you could be the most seriously abused. You don't even know which way the gun shoots, right? Well, he didn't know what way the gun shooted, I don't care. He managed to pull the trigger. Therefore, he exercises free will. Therefore, he's forfeited his right to live and all this other stuff like drug addict, alcoholic, poverty, no previous record, well-behaved, abused as a child. It's just bullshit, and you're irritating these people. That's who you got if that's who you let get on the jury. So, no, it's not going to save you, all right?
And Dave often says, when we talk about this method, it's not optional to consider mitigation. I mean, jurors have to be able to give consideration and effect to our mitigation, and if they can't, they are disqualified from serving on the jury. The example Dave often uses is, if you were trying a burglary case and the juror said, you're picking the jury, and the juror says, well, I can consider elements 1 through 4, but 5, I just don't like element number 5. I don't want to have to consider whether it was a residence. No, I don't do that. I don't like that. I don't think I'll do it.
Well, being a millennial and all, you're opposed to ownership of property in that way.
Maybe that's it.
It's not if it's over 5,000 square feet, you don't have a right to own that property. So I'm not going to consider that a resident. You would be excused from the jury, right?
Yeah, you can't just refuse to consider something which you're required to consider as a juror. And so mitigation, I think sometimes we're just like, oh, well, I hope they do. I hope they will. Maybe if they hear how good my mitigation is, then that'll, change their mind.
It made me and all the paralegals cry when we read it.
Yeah. And so, we can't do that. We have to get rid of people who will not consider it. You are entitled, your client is entitled to jurors who coming in say that they will be able to give value and effect to your mitigation.
And value and effect is constitutional language.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yep. Not just listen. You can't just listen like Dave does.
Be polite. Don't attack anybody during the presentation. I can't listen to this anymore. I'm killing that son of a bitch. No, you're not allowed to fight amongst yourself. And you listening? I don't want to listen. Or close your ears. That's not going to work. All right, so let's move on to the principles we use in our voir dire, which is not just wandering around and asking weak questions and just seeing how we do, right?
Bumper stickers.
If there was one lesson you could teach your child, what would that be? Can you tell me a little bit more about that market you shop at and why you like that more than Whole Foods, all that bullshit? Because I'm going to tell you right now, you got people. That stuff doesn't work. So we do a value-oriented voir dire, which goes to the core value, which is your belief in the death penalty. All right, upon the conviction of first-degree murder. Now the trick is, they don't want the juror to ever know what first-degree murder is because they just call it murder, right? Mm-hmm. But you're not really. And that's improper, and you need to object because you can't get the death penalty for just like murder, second-degree murder, or third-degree, or what states have murder all the way down to manslaughter, whatever. Jurors don't differentiate between manslaughter and murder. You kill somebody. All that other stuff is just fluff, what they call it, right?
Well, and I think if you don't have defined first-degree murder in the conversation with the juror, I don't think you're making a good record because it's going to read that, well, I wouldn't give the death penalty for murder. And it's not clear, right? And so it's not clear whether they're talking about, the negligent homicide. They wouldn't give the death penalty for that. Well, that's irrelevant to your record because we're not talking about death penalty for negligent homicide. It has to be clear that the conversation you're having with the juror is about intentional, deliberate, after deliberation, premeditated, whatever your state or federal statute, however it reads for culpable mental state. It has to be clear to the juror that that's what you're talking about, so that if they say, I will automatically give the death penalty for that, Well, when you put it like that, Mr. Wymore, I would definitely give the death penalty.
And always.
That is how you identify them and how you challenge and excuse them, because the record is clear that they are ADP.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what we do. Because you got to organize your attack in your voir dire. Otherwise, you're just up there wandering around. So our attack is, number one, because we believe that 7s and 6s and 5s don't value mitigation and are automatic death penalty to a large degree. Our goal is, why don't we get rid of those people first, no matter what else happens, because then you got a fighting chance with everybody else. So first thing we do, we remove pro-death jurors. Okay, that's our job. If there's only one job to do, we're going to run Morgan on them, and we're going to strip them out and see if they understand first-degree murder and find out if they're ADP. Understanding that 7s and 6s don't give a damn about anything in the penalty phase other than affixing their signature to the death penalty. Okay, we always pick jurors only on our death penalty views, not on, I think she liked me, or the color of their skin, or how they wear their hair, or what organizations they belong or don't belong to, or anything else. No matter what you think, no matter what you believe about somebody, when you meet them, they can be I've had some of the most liberal looking people of every, color, generation, and you can have the entire spectrum of every progressive thing in the world, and you ask them the strip question, oh yeah, that guy gets the death penalty. Okay, you just cannot project labels onto people. So don't pick them on your defense. No, well, I think they really were good on self-defense, which you're not going to make, because you're going to have imperfect self-defense. Like, did you read about that kid up in the steamboat camping, the 14-year-old boy? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a perfect case. 14-year-old kid, he's got a 57-year-old stepfather just a couple days ago. And this guy's a drunk and beating his mom. And he's out, so he's busy. They're fighting all day long, according to witnesses, arguing, fighting. And so this guy evidently, takes off after mom and got her down on the ground and is beating the shit out of her. And the kid comes out, because stepfather made the mistake of bringing the gun, probably, and fires a warning shot, says gets off her, shoots him right in the back. Okay, now that is murder, but that's the one where I might not be for the death penalty. Okay, really? Well, that's not your guy. Okay, that kid is not your guy, and should they need assistance from Tammy and Dave to go up and make sure that doesn't happen, we are here ready to go. All right, and not because you think they like you. So no demographic stereotypes, no, in your defense, and not because that you think, oh, I really, this whole try and establish a connection with the jury. Okay, well, plenty of people have liked me and voted to kill my client. But didn't you have 9 people like you and vote to kill your client on the Holmes case?
They might have.
Yeah, they
both
might have.
not liked me and voted to kill.
Yeah, but I mean, I've had,
Yeah.
you're swell. You did a hell of a job. Pat. Get a head pat. No one needs a head pat in the jury selection. So, and then we're going to process for life, and we're going to exhaust all our peremptory challenges based on death view ratings, because our job as trial lawyers is create challenges for cause, perfect challenges for cause, and sustain challenges for cause for the appellate lawyers, because it's a long game. The death penalty is a long game, and that's how people come off the row in the long game, right, Tammy?
That's right, Dave.
Yeah, okay.
So we have come up with, it's called a hanger, which it looks like this.
It's probably in their material.
And it's in, you got the Champion article to read in preparation for this, and the hanger is in the Champion article. You've probably seen it. But anyway, it lays out the process by which we do this method. At the top of the hanger, we talk about stripping the defenses away from first-degree murder. Strip, identify, and rate the juror. And then you break out on the hanger depending on whether you think that this juror is a life-prone juror or a death-prone juror. And so it dictates, how you conduct the rest of your questioning based on what kind of juror you think you have.
Well, why don't you go down, since we're going to talk mainly about stripping, why don't you go down the because we believe most people are
The
on
killer
that.
side?
Yeah, which,
The side that we're always concerned about the killers, because they're the ones who will give our clients the death penalty. We can handle the life-giving jurors later, but they seem to be easier. But the ones looking to give our client the death penalty, and so we strip, and we'll go more into detail about that, but we get them to answer questions about if they think the death penalty is the only appropriate penalty upon conviction of first-degree murder. And if they say yes, or seem to be leaning toward yes, we go down the right side, from my right side of the hanger, to begin to challenge the people who are prone to impose the death penalty. And what we do is we try and stack challenges on them. So one basis for your challenge for cause might be that, based upon the strip question and their answer to the can opener, was that they would always impose the death penalty upon conviction of first-degree murder. Next, they will not give value and effect to mitigation in the case. They have a presumption for death, or they're always going to vote for death. They're going to shift the burden onto the defense to prove why life over death is most appropriate, and you stack challenges. You want as many reasons as possible to ask to excuse this juror. A, hopefully they'll be excused, and B, like Dave said, if they don't get excused, then you have an appellate issue. And so you stack your challenges. You ask them all the questions you want to ask to establish your challenge for cause, and then before you leave that juror, because we don't know whether or not we're going to win that challenge for cause, we do something called teach respect. And so before we ever leave a juror, we either teach respect or insulate and isolate them. So jurors prone to death, we teach respect to, and what that means is we quickly explain to them that the death penalty is never required, not in this case, in a case, or the worst case you can imagine, and that even if they think that the death penalty is appropriate in a particular case, other people in the jury room may not feel that way, and that those people are entitled to their opinions and have a right and responsibility to get their opinions back and verdict back out into the courtroom, and establish with that juror who's on the 5 to 7 side of the hanger that they will respect the other jurors once they get back into the courtroom. And as an aside, if you haven't heard Scott Sunby speak or read his book, you really need to, because all of the things, every time we talk about this now, I think about the jurors in his book.
Ken versus Patty? Or
Peggy,
the victim
but
juror.
he interviews real capital jurors after verdicts and hears about what went on in the jury room, and just the way in which they coerce the life jurors into changing their votes to death. I mean, this part about teaching respect or insulating, isolating is what I think is the most important thing we do, both in jury selection and throughout trial, because if one vote for life goes back, but it goes back into the jury room and then comes out a death verdict, I mean, that was us. We did not teach them well enough to survive what happens back there, and teach the people who, the killers, to not beat up on the life votes. And so that's really our responsibility, to make sure this happens, that if you have a juror prone to vote for life, you teach them respect. If you have a juror prone to vote for life, that you insulate and isolate them and give them what they need to survive the deliberation room and get back out with their life verdict.
Actually, that was the beginning of our first voir dire. Actually, my first capital voir dire was like 83, I don't know, something like that. 82, I don't know. But anyway, being the scared rabbit I was, all I did was just do the juror Bill of Rights. You know, you have a right to vote for life. You have a right to choose life. You have a right to respect from the other jurors. And it didn't have the component of attacking on the sevens until we started doing that shortly thereafter, because Mike Harrah helped me, and we said, well, we just need to attack this. If we can sustain the juror Bill of Rights on the second end, we should really go forward, because it's the best way to do it, and it resonates with them. And all you got to do is tell jurors their rights, and they will attach to them. All right. Now, one thing about somebody's book is really good, and I think I keep preaching. One vote, a juror who votes for life in the state of Colorado, a juror who has gone through all the process and has listened to all the mitigation and weighted against the aggravation, and weighted against the death penalty, and understand all the things. If that juror has a vote for life, that's a legal and valid verdict. In your state, my state, any state, it's their legal and valid verdict as one juror within a capital sentencing scheme. The 11 others, or I don't give a goddamn how many other jurors you got, are now holdouts for death. Your vote for life is not a holdout against the death penalty, because they have already reached the legal and valid verdict, going through the process and understanding how it works, and they are giving one mitigating factor, a mitigating factors, or the circumstances of that capital case, the legal and valid verdict for death. People don't, I mean, if you're getting in there pretending that you're a holdout, I don't do that. I go, if you've got the life verdict, there are 11 holdouts for death. You got to redefine them into their own little hole of hate over there. You got to separate them out. Ken would never be on our jury. That was a 1995 case. But Ken, we would have pigeonholed and put him in his own little pot over there where he couldn't beat up on Peggy throughout the thing, right?
Yeah, and Peggy would have known
exactly
how to get out of, in the book. And what Scott talks about is one juror and the group of jurors are making the life juror do homework assignments, sit in the corner, write a letter,
put things on the wall.
All these, making her do all of these things until she just gives in and says final vote for death. And through this process, what we would do is tell Peggy, you don't have to do any of that. You can listen to what the other jurors have to say. You can share your thoughts and feelings about the death penalty and life without parole if you want to, but you don't have to. And once you've decided in your heart of hearts that life is the appropriate sentence for you, you get up, you knock on the door, and you say, hey, can you let the judge know that Peggy is done in here? She is voting for a life sentence. Thank you, and it's over.
Over.
You don't have to do homework. You don't have to sit in the corner. You don't have to.
Legitimate verdict.
Legitimate verdict.
Legal verdict.
We're done.
Legal verdict and a legitimate verdict. Okay, that is the big separation, because the haters want to say, well, that's not a real verdict. That's not the legitimate verdict. You didn't you tell the judge you could give the death penalty? Well, yeah, but not in this case, bucko. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, these. You're not Judge Smales where you didn't want to give him the death penalty, but you felt it, you owed it to him. Just like, he's telling Spalding. All right, so processing for life, all right? 8 steps, and I'm sure this is in your material. We strip. So this is how we go through it. This is our mental step. This is the method. We strip. In the process of stripping, we identify, right?
Yep.
Then we rate them in our mind. Okay, you're challenging killers, because that's what we do in our principles. And we life qualify in the process of challenging the killers. We teach duty to respect to the killers. We insulate and isolate the people on the other side of the chart. If they have if they have hesitancy, if I really bang out a big script question and make it impactful and talk about murder and figure out, all about murder, make murder real, first-degree murder, and they're going, I don't know so much about that. You don't have to kill anybody. You're never required to give the death penalty. I begin to insulate them and isolate them, and we'll show you quickly that process. We teach right and respect to whatever verdict is. That way, we're teaching respect to. We tell the killers, it's not your game. The state of Colorado has set it up for any one juror can have a legitimate and a legal verdict of life, and you're out of the game. Can you party with that? Show how to get life verdict out of the jury room. And because, having that life verdict back in the jury room is not okay, Most cases, they always start with 3 vote for life, and then something went wrong, and blah blah blah. I remember in 1978 or in '79, I'm down in New Orleans, and they bring 3 jurors up, and we did all a little hand wringing and eye wiping, and oh, isn't that sad? Because they wanted to give the life verdict, but somehow they just couldn't. I'm like, what in the hell are these? No, it was 87, not 78. It was like, what in the hell are you guys talking about? And I started yelling at the group there, and I wasn't invited back for many years. Stripping is our Morgan question, I just like to name things, so I called it stripping because it's easy to talk about and it's easy to converse with your partners, and so you all know where you're at when you're doing your Morgan question. Okay. Now, I know that anymore, people have to call it like other things in other states so that it doesn't have any connection to the Colorado method, Tammy Brady or David Wymore or any one of us because of our radical views that one juror can give life. So stripping is, and I put it up there, I mean, they'll buzz out on, he's asking a hypothetical question. Well, Judge, you and the DA just spent like a day and a half going through the hypothetical of him being convicted of murder and whether or not you could consider the death penalty called death qualification. They don't seem to, so they buzz out on these words. So sometimes you use your own words, whatever doesn't make the dullards rise up and hit bait like a Budweiser beer can. Okay, hypothetically, and stripping is this. I have to conceptually put the juror at the point of conviction of first-degree murder. Should you not have the juror understand what first-degree murder is, what the elements of first-degree murder are in your state, what the cognitive elements are, what the intentional elements are, what the murder is, and it's of an innocent person, it's a guilty verdict. You might just sit down because you are just blowing hot air around the room. Okay, so whatever fabulous kind of conversational thing and getting to know them and you shop at Steel Market too. I love it over there. That's just all nonsense because you're not talking. You guys are 2 ships and you're just passing. They're talking about the 14-year-old kid up at Steamboat, and you're talking about your murderous goddamn guy. All right. So you gotta introduce right off the bat first-degree murder. That's the first point. And we do that in a sort of a collected manner. We because I want to make sure I don't want to hear the depends answer. I don't want to hear, well, it depends on what the other jurors did. All of you, beyond a reasonable doubt, got together, guilty of first-degree murder. You and the 11 other jurors have heard a case. And it's not this case, but it's a hypothetical case. The reason we do that is keep it in Morgan. So we're not staking out the jury, right, in our case. So we're doing a pure Morgan question. So it's just you and the 11 other jurors have been called in and asked to sit on a trial. And that trial happens to be first-degree murder. And first-degree murder in this state is with the intentional, what in Colorado we call intentional, that means the deliberate, conscious object. And it also means after deliberation, and that's another element we have for first-degree murder in the state of Colorado. Did you know that, Tammy?
I did not.
So after deliberation means that you thought about it, you had judgment and reflection. So not only did you intentionally kill that person, your conscious object was to kill him, that you reflected on it. You exercised your judgment. What we call that is your free will. You exercised free will and you went ahead and killed that innocent person. And you and the 11 other jurors have heard all the evidence there was to hear, and you and the 11 other jurors have decided beyond a reasonable doubt that that person was guilty. So all 12 jurors decided beyond a reasonable doubt that person was guilty of the first-degree murder, the intentional murder of an innocent person. You follow me now a little bit on what we're talking about, first-degree murder? Okay. So, and that's all to get down to what I have in italics here is what we call the can opener, to ask about what are your feelings about the death penalty as the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murder. Now, you might think I'm done. You might think I'm done by asking just that first-degree murder, studying what first-degree murder is, collectivizing or putting in a collective consciousness beyond a reasonable doubt and explaining the elements and finding guilty first-degree murder. No. You know why? Because they're still, in their mind, thinking, okay, well, that sounds good, but, if it was self-defense, I would never give him death penalty. If that 14-year-old kid shooting that guy in the back was beating his mama, I wouldn't give him death penalty. Now, are they truly innocent? I'm not going to give them. I'll convict them, but I won't give them, the first degree murder. Or if it was, it's abusive relationship and all these things. So what we do is we go through and strip out. We do tell them, well, here's what is not first degree murder. So we all got a grip on what first degree murder is. Everybody got a grip on that?
Yep.
All right. But let's talk about what it's not. Okay. So we're going to strip away first phase defenses and mitigations, because the jurors believe that innocence is mitigation. To them, mitigation is innocent. Well, if he's innocent, life is
no reason to kill him.
Life's okay. If the guy was beating you and you're about ready to hit you in the head with a rock, a brick, and you just stabbed him, like looking up like that, and he died. Okay, maybe that I won't. Well, ma'am, that's not first degree murder. That's called self-defense. So you got to start stripping out what first degree murder is not. What you're doing is taking away their mental image, Tammy, of what they think is where they wouldn't give the death penalty. But that's never first degree murder. So I got to take away their every juror.
Got to strip it away.
Strip it away.
Strip it away.
Take it out. Just rip it right out of there. Maybe I ought to call ripping. Maybe I'll take the ripping.
Stripping and ripping.
Stripping and ripping. Yeah. Okay. So, and I like to use strong language. Next slide. Okay. I use strong language because you gotta put a little blood in the courtroom. You gotta do. I've had people read the chart and well, that's as impressive as the HOA regulations over at the condo. Okay, it's got to be a little stronger than HOA regulations. Still not plant a tree without previous okay. Oh boy, way to kill it on that, bro. Okay, use strong language to describe the conviction. What we're talking about here is cold-blooded, premeditated, meant to do it, first-degree murder of an innocent person. Wrap it out, right?
Yep.
We're going to strip away not guilty, lesser included offenses. Okay, it's not manslaughter. It's not, it's not, and it's not
heat of passion.
It's not heat of passion. It's no abusive situation. Well, there may have been elements of that, but you found beyond a reasonable doubt he is guilty of first-degree murder. Strip away mental and alcohol abuse offenses, right? And you may have heard evidence that the person was under the influence, or he was really drunk, but you and the 11 other jurors decided no, he had the capacity to deliberate, he had the capacity to reflect, and he had the judgment to reflect, and went ahead and killed that innocent person, all right? Well, gee, Mr. Wymore, that sounds pretty strong. What are your client thinking? Well, your client's thinking a lot of different things, but I am not concerned, okay? We let him quit making judgment calls and tactical calls upon the horrible murder of which you've now been assigned, okay? Strip away mistake and ID defense, strip away accident. It wasn't an accident. There's no mistake. They got the right guy. So we don't ask a hypothetical question. Instead, we put the juror in a hypothetical situation in order to ask the real questions about their death penalty. Always talk collectively, you and the 11 other jurors. Use precise language of your state statutory definition. And then after I strip through all the blocks, my final question, it's called a can opener. It's up there on the first thing. So, given all that of what first-degree murder is, Miss Brady, and what first-degree murder is not, what are your feelings about the death penalty as the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murder? You notice I don't put, or could you consider the life sentence? I'm not a beggar. I'm not a beggar, I understand the game I'm in, okay? So I'm not a hoper, I'm not a hand wringer, I'm not a beggar, I'm not a person that's trying to build a consensus or that, because you know who? My client doesn't need that guy, all right? My client needs this guy who's going to go find killers and get rid of them. And I want them to say, well, since you put it that way, Mr. Wymore, as you were going through that, I think that the death penalty is the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murder. Then I began to attack them. Well, life sentence would never be appropriate penalty. You could never consider the life sentence as a penalty, even though it's provided for in the state of Colorado in your mind. And it's, your mind is no way, because he exercised his free will. I could, any kind of mitigation, you wouldn't listen to it. You wouldn't value that as a reason. His familyhood, where he was alcohol, where he took drugs, you'd even think that's worse, right? So you just aggravate it and get it on. So that was a quick run through.
A good thing to come back to at this point and think about is our number one goal. Remember at the beginning of this, we talked about our number one goal is to find the people who will impose the death penalty and excuse them. And the strip question invites people who are 6s and 7s to speak up now. We don't want them to hide. We don't want to say, you'll follow the law, won't you? You're not going to automatically vote. You know, we don't want them hiding and then getting on the jury and then executing our client. We want them to tell us the truth right now. And, you know, and we do explain to the client, look, here's the process we're going to go through. And the reason is because if someone's going to automatically give the death penalty, tell me now while I can do something about it. A challenge for cause, and at the very least, teach them respect. So you want them to say, the answer that you want to the can opener is, well, when you describe it like that, yes, I would give the death penalty. I would always give the death penalty, because that is your challenge for cause.
Wait a minute. When you just go, so you just went through it and told them what first degree murder was, and you told them what first degree murder was not. Isn't that staking out a jury, Tammy?
That is not staking out a jury. You're not you're asking them, and that's why we do it in a hypothetical situation. You're not saying, in this case, if Mr. Holmes is convicted, what will you do? We are asking about, a hypothetical defendant. If you convict, you and the other 11 jurors convict a defendant of first degree murder, here's what that is, here's what that is not. Will you automatically impose the death penalty for conviction of first degree murder for that guilty?
We never say automatic.
Right.
But so the DA's objective, you're confusing the jury. You go, no, how am I confusing the jury by telling them what first degree murder is and what first degree murder is not? And then I accuse them. You judge, they're hoping that the jurors don't understand what first degree murder is.
Yeah.
They're hoping that they have a definition of defense as mitigation. I understand their tactical thing there, but the confusing the jury is what it's not. It's clearly explaining what you and the DA so far have persistently and consistently not done, is tell them where the only time they can exercise a decision as to life or death is the event of first degree murder, and you will not do it. So you need to start now. So let's go stripping. We work through.
So we go through blocks in order to keep it organized in our head. So you start out, you put them in the hypothetical situation. They and the other 11 jurors have convicted beyond a reasonable doubt that defendant of first degree murder, intentional, deliberate, thought about it, meant to do it, guilty murderer, okay, of an innocent victim. And then your block one is you strip away defenses. So you say you've convicted that defendant of first degree murder, and in that case, you and the 11 other jurors decided there were no defenses. It wasn't done in self-defense. It wasn't done defending someone else. It wasn't a heat of passion situation where they walked in and found their significant other in bed with someone else and snapped and killed the person. It's not that. It was not duress. They were not made to kill someone else. In that case, there were no defenses. And that is why you convicted that person of first degree murder. Block two. It was not a case where the defendant was insane or intellectually or developmentally disabled. If you heard any evidence that the person struggled with mental health issues or had a low IQ or anything like that, you and the other 11 jurors considered that evidence. You decided no, that person was still able to intentionally form the conscious object, to premeditate, reflect, plan. That person is guilty of first degree murder. This is not a case where they didn't know right from wrong. This is not a case where there's any sort of defense for mental incapacity. Then you move to block three, which is also that person, the defendant in that case, was not so drunk or high on drugs that he couldn't form the intent and deliberate and kill that innocent person. So you strip away defenses, you strip away mental illnesses, you strip away drug and alcohol intoxication. And then in block 4, just to cover it, you say, this was not a murder that was done by mistake. It was not an accident. And the police got the right person. You and the other 11 jurors were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the person the police arrested, the defendant in that case, was the one who committed that first-degree murder, and you convicted the person of first-degree murder. Now, there's something called bridging language, which we use sometimes when we're transitioning from one block to the next block, that you can use. And we can talk about this more if we do a more intense training. We can explain the bridging language a little bit more, but basically it's, despite whatever evidence you heard concerning mental illness at trial, you and the 11 other jurors have decided beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant acted intentionally and after deliberation and knew what he was going to do and that he meant to do it. So that's the bridging language.
You use that in order to, you don't want to get up and tell them that
there is no mental illness.
Yeah, there is no self-defense.
Because there usually is,
or
right.
There is no alcohol. It's to differentiate between the elements and mitigation, okay? And this is very hard to do, but this is the language you use. And so instead of, despite whatever evidence you heard concerning mental illness, but self-defense or alcohol, drug abuse, poverty, whatever are the defenses or insanity or mental functioning, you just say you and the 11 jurors have decided, okay, yeah, that's there, but I still believe beyond a reasonable doubt he had the capacity of intent, premeditation, exercise of free will, and went ahead and did it in judgment and reflection. Boom. Right?
Yep.
That's all it is, right? But
yep.
Okay, then we got the can opener.
And then the can opener is the final question you ask, and years of debate and conversation have gone into the exact language of this can opener. And
that's not mine, so I don't know who wrote that. Oh, you wrote that, huh?
Well, that's the can opener I asked. See, the debate is still going on.
But that only went through 3,000 people in the Holmes case, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, but the can opener is, what are your feelings about the death penalty as the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murderer? And only appropriate, those two words are chosen carefully because you're trying to get a challenge for cause if this is a 6 or 7. Is that the only sentence you will impose is what we're asking, but the language we use, given all that, what are your feelings about the death penalty is the only appropriate penalty for that guilty murderer. Because what do we want? We want those jurors who are so inclined to tell us now, yes, it is. Why do we have the death penalty if not for that person? Why wouldn't I give that person the death penalty? Of course I would give that person the death penalty. We want them to say that and say that freely if that's how they feel. And so the can opener is designed and crafted to be most welcoming for those jurors to tell us that if that's how they feel.
That's who we're looking for.
That's who we're looking for.
We're hunting killers. All right, so normally in Boulder, we'd break now where you would go and practice the strip question. And we wouldn't, and when you come to Boulder and you practice a strip question, that's called start doing our voir dire now. Don't start with your how you do's and what you are, and here's how I always start, and blah, blah, blahs, and I want to introduce you to them. And, in capital voir dire, niceties, like a 5-minute, like most people on a cell phone, pretend you're on a cell phone with bad service, way up in the Rockies. So you get on the phone and the first 5 minutes, well, how are you? Good. How are you? You really want to tell them you've broken your leg and you need a rescue. So you go through the niceties, and then, right when you say, oh, by the way, I've broken my leg, I'm in a ditch and I need to look, and it cuts out, okay? Well, that's the same thing with capital voir dire. Just go to it and get it done because everybody can set up on you for everywhere else, okay? The niceties don't help in the Rockies with a broken leg in a crevice, right? Because your server's going to cut out. Okay. Right. Does that help the world? I think that helps the world, that analogy. Don't you?
I think so.
Okay. So
I think so.
Helping the world. All right, now we're going to process for life. So we do kind of a truncated situation here.
So the way we teach this, because we want to teach you the most important things first. So we introduce the strip question and the can opener to tell you how we get to the part where we talk about to the juror about what their feelings are about death and life. But then, because we don't ever want to run out of time or not give enough emphasis to this part, we'll skip to the bottom where we teach respect and insulate, isolate. Again, I think I've said, I always say, if you do anything, do this. If a judge ever said to me, Ms. Brady, you can only address the juror for 2 minutes, this is what I would do. Because, again, I think people are going to go into the deliberation room either being life or death leaning, and they need to come out with a life verdict if that's, and we have to make sure that happens. We have to.
Let's put it this way. The strip question is the legal part. It's getting rid of the killers, it's building challenges, it's creating error, right? For leaving jurors that are definitely, that are ADP on the jury. This part is saving lives. That's because that's what I did first. And that started working. I mean, it is true. I remember on your first death case when you called me up and the jury was out, and David, I go, well, did you isolate the jury? She goes, yes. And I go, okay, well, then it looks pretty good, right?
Yep.
And that came out fine, right?
Yep.
And the same thing I told you during Holmes, right?
Yep.
Did you isolate and isolate the jury?
Yep.
Did you teach respect?
Yep.
Teach them how to get out of the jury room?
Yep.
Okay. What the hell are you worried about? Chicken Little. Okay, so you know, a lot of this stuff. I think we only got 20 minutes, don't we?
Yep.
All right. So teaching respect and insulate. Okay, you do teaching respect. I'll get ready to do the Bill of Rights. We'll rip this up. Okay.
So teach respect. That's when, and I've touched on this earlier. That's when a juror has indicated to you that they're probably going to vote for, or absolutely will vote for the death penalty upon conviction of first-degree murder. And so in your head, in your team's head, you're fairly confident that this juror is someone you're going to challenge for cause. You don't want them to be on your jury. But what if they are? What if you lose the challenge for cause and they are on your jury? You want to make sure and give them these principles and ask them to commit to these principles before they go back there. And so, you know, you talk about, you know, how the sentencing trial is different than the merits trial. And notice I don't call it guilt phase and death phase, because that's death processing. In the merits phase, in the murder trial, you know, the jury is trying to establish facts. There are right and wrong answers. Did the bullet match the gun or not? Did that fingerprint match or not? Did they get the right guy or not? There are right and wrong answers that you can debate about, you can talk about, and try and come up with the right answer as a group. Now, in a sentencing trial, it's different. It's the only area of the law where the law sends a jury back into a deliberation room and tells them to use their own individual moral assessment. That each individual looks for themselves for mitigation, values mitigation, weighs mitigation, and aggravation by themselves. It is an individual moral choice. There are no right or wrong answers. There's only right or wrong for each individual juror. That if you have a vote that's different from others in the room, the law says that's okay. That's how it's supposed to work. Once a juror decides for him or herself that life sentence is the appropriate sentence, it's over. It's over. They have a right, a duty, and an obligation to bring their life vote into the courtroom, and you know, the jurors are obligated to respect that person or those people who think that life is appropriate. Sir, do you think you could do that? You seem like the kind of guy who wants your opinion to be respected. In turn, will you respect the opinions of other people? You won't resort to bullying or badgering or something like that back there, right? No, because we live in a civilized society, and jury rooms, especially in issues of morality, are obligated to behave with respect to the other jurors. And once someone tells you, thank you for sharing with me, but I'm done, I think it should be a life sentence, you're going to let that person notify the court and bring that life verdict back into the courtroom, aren't you? You know, thank you. And so you teach them that's how it's going to go back there. Someone's going to disagree with you, and you cannot beat them up. They have a moral obligation to stick by what they believe in and bring that back into the courtroom. And you, sir, cannot coerce them to change their mind.
As I've been thinking, maybe it's time to start telling them. You realize at that point, in that juncture, you'd be a holdout for death.
Right.
But the life verdict is a legitimate and legal verdict of which that other person says in the law, and you follow the law, allow that verdict to be returned.
Yep.
I mean, without doing violence or insult to other people. You
Yep.
know, understand that's the situation you found yourself in.
Yep.
They have to work that in.
Yep. And you have to tell the death jurors, just like the life jurors, you have to tell them. You understand that the death penalty is never required, not in this case, any case, the worst case you can imagine. State of Colorado never requires the death penalty.
We'll
One
catch that
vote,
up.
but you tell the death jurors that too,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that they're not hearing it for the first time from the life juror back there. They have to hear it from you, so that they don't get back there and say the death penalty is required in this case.
That is the worst thing about processing. That is the worst, the most unconstitutional and jury. I mean, and just.
It's a travesty.
It is a travesty. That's why I call them death process and mofos, you know? I mean, because that's what jurors get. The death penalty is required. I'm required to give the death penalty. Can I nut up and give the death penalty? That's the effect of death processing that Haney was trying to tell everybody about. So let's, the Juror Bill of Rights, I put it in, it may be in your materials. This was my voir dire in 1980, I can't remember. Okay, I'm sorry. 84, 85, 86, I don't know, right? But my first death case, I was just home, kind of worried about what to do, reading other people's shitty voir dire and, you know, all this stuff. And I was going, well, that sucked. That didn't seem to do anything. So there was an opinion that came out and said any one juror in the state of Colorado can vote for death regardless of the mandatory nature of the statute as it may appear. And so I wrote the Juror Bill of Rights, and you try to impact. And so the first thing you say is always the most impactful. The right to decide for yourself whether the person lives or dies. And when you tell them the jurors they got rights, but so this is how this is all morphed out of the Juror Bill of Rights. But their Juror Bill of Rights, if this is all you can say, you can get up and do this. You can read the Juror Bill of Rights in a very monotone to the jury, like the HOA things, and you got a chance to win. All right, the right by your individual vote to give life, the right to give your own individual determination as to whether an aggravating factor has been proven to your satisfaction. If not, it's life. And you always go back to how it's life. The right to find your own mitigating factor and assign it the weight sufficient. This is a huge one. This is Maryland versus Mills. Mitigation doesn't have to be unanimous. Mitigation is never voted upon by others. Mitigation you don't even have to explain it. You can give a mitigating factor, any mitigating factor, a mitigating factor that you can't even explain. The weight of life, once you give a mitigating factor the weight of life, then you have the duty and obligation to vote for life, and that life verdict will be a legal and legitimate verdict, and you have the power to, and you have the obligation to return it to the courtroom. All right. So as I go through these, the right to give whatever weight you personally want to any mitigating factor, I repeat the same thing over and over because it's kind of alien. They don't know what mitigation is. Mitigation is really nothing but a reason under the law, a reason to choose life, right?
Over the death penalty.
Over the death penalty. That's what a mitigating factor is, a reason to choose life. And it's not any one thing. The jurors don't get it. They'll go, well, for you it might be one thing, for them it could be another thing. It's just a reason to choose life. And once you found a mitigating factor, you have a right to give that the weight of life. And if you give something the weight of life, doesn't matter how many aggravating factors.
Yeah.
It's wacky, it's crazy, it's fun. Okay. But you call it a right, and you notice how I just kept pounding the rights on this. Let's go to the final one. The right to have your vote respected by other jurors, the prosecution, and the judge. And that's how I ended it, all right? Then it morphed out, and then I started calling it insulation isolation. Steps for insulation isolation, okay? And then I'll let you come out and do, once you do a couple of these blocks, and I'll jump in. You can do like one. Okay.
Well, let me just say real quick, when you practice, when you do the more in-depth training and you practice insulation isolation, what we do is have you practice saying this language over and over and over and over and over again. And I always say it's kind of like the Pledge of Allegiance. The reason we can all say it automatically, whether we're tired or sick or depressed, or you can say the Pledge of Allegiance because we said it so much as children. And we've heard it so many times that it's ingrained in our head. This language for insulation isolation has got to be like that. You have to be able to just stand up and insulate, isolate on a moment's notice when you're exhausted, when you're stressed, and be able to do it in a convincing manner. You can't just read it like the HOA regulations. You have to read it like your client's life depends on it, because it does.
You've got to go big.
And every juror that's the juror who could save my client's life. Next, that's the juror who could save my client's life. And so you do it with the passion and intensity of every juror. You say it that way. And then as a group, you say it that way, because that is how they will save your client's life.
And as we'll go through the blocks, but we put the blocks in order for a reason, because of primacy. And you can do anything for 45 seconds as if you jump up and do it for 45 seconds, because usually it takes about 45 seconds, 50 seconds for anybody to object to you. So I always operate on the 45-second rule, that the shit I got to get out is going to go out in 45 seconds, and it's going to be big, and it's going to be huge, and people are going to sit back in their chair. You don't tippy-toe in. Can permission to address the jury, Your Honor? No, that doesn't work in definite litigation. It's bloody. All right, so let's go through the steps and why the steps are here. I got to take care of the processing effects, Tammy, and the processing effects are that the death penalty is required, that unanimous, that you have to be unanimous on both on life or death, that the death penalty is required. I've got to empower the life givers. Okay, I've got to teach them how they operate within there, and that their power is greater than the 11 holdouts for death. All right. I've got to have them. I got to get them to understand what mitigation is, because people don't know what it is. It's so vague, even lawyers don't know what it is. Okay, so I've got to introduce my mitigation and what it is. I've got to empower mitigation. I've got to teach them how it works. I have to make them understand non-unanimity as to mitigation. That no one's going to vote on your mitigation, because mitigation comes from your own perceptions, your own walk of life, your own common sense. Right? I have to give effect to mitigation. The right to give it the weight of life, right? That how, once you find a mitigating factor, okay, what do I do with the thing now? Well, you have the right, and once again, I bang in the right to give it the weight of life, okay? No, so I have the right to, people can't tell me, well, that doesn't mean shit. That guy painted, he's painting down at the joint. He loves his mama. That don't mean shit. Well, it doesn't mean shit to Bubba, but it can mean shit to you, and you have the right to give that, people like rights. Give them the rights. Then their obligation upon giving a mitigating factor the weight of life to return the verdict of life, and the right to respect duty to have the verdict returned in the courtroom. I can't quit. I got to go to get that verdict out in the courtroom and show them how that works, okay?
Yep.
So when we do insulation isolation blocks, the first insulation isolation block you do is big. You got to go big, man. You got to go stomp on them.
All right, so we need to tell every juror, in Colorado, Colorado never requires a death verdict in any case. Not in this case, in any case, in the worst case you can imagine. And with that, you tell them not in this case, not ever, even in a worst case. And so you suggest to them there are worse cases than this one. Maybe the death penalty is appropriate, but not in this case, in a worst case.
It's not required.
Never required. Never required. Colorado is always satisfied with the life verdict in any case, in this case, in the worst case you can imagine.
And then we've added on to that The life verdict is a legitimate and legal verdict. Okay.
It's not a holdout. Like Dave
I need
said.
to make a note to
put that in there.
Put that it's a life, that it's legitimate and legal verdict.
Any one juror can choose life, and the verdict will be life. How that works is called mitigation. So you're telling them one juror can do it, and the way that you do it is through mitigation, a legal term meaning any one juror's reason to choose life or to not choose death. Mitigation comes from each individual juror's unique background and walk of life. Each individual juror determines for themselves what is mitigation. Your own individual moral determination to choose life. It does not have to be unanimous. And some examples that we often use to demonstrate this are like when you decide whether to get married, when you decide who to marry, when you decide whether to have children, how to raise your children, what religion, if any, to belong to. Those are individual moral decisions, and you can listen to what other people think about all that, but in the end, you make your own decision on those moral decisions, even if they're different from other people. And it's not right or wrong. It's a matter of faith. It's a matter of morality. And you don't have, if someone criticizes your religion or says it's wrong, you don't care because you have the right to practice your religion or no religion, and no one should criticize you for those moral decisions. This is that kind of decision. Life and death is that kind of decision. No one has the perfect common sense as to who lives and who dies.
It's a question is, who do you kill?
Yep.
And what's your walk of life? Like, in this very jurisdiction, like 30 years ago, Brian Sheehy had a horrible rape murder. And they had one guy on the jury held out for life. And when we talked to him afterwards, he goes, that kid was in the Navy. I was in the Navy. I'm not giving any guy who's in the Navy the death penalty. That is a perfect example of one individual moral determination. Now, we introduced the fact that he was in the Navy. We introduced the fact that he, served his country and he completed it. Boom. Now, for one guy, one vote for life. That's how it works.
Perfectly legitimate vote for life.
Perfect, legal, legitimate vote for life. And that's all he told those guys back there. Hey, he's in the Navy. I was in the Navy. I'm voting for life. Boom. It's over. Okay?
Segue into block 5, where the jurors can give any one mitigating factor. So if the fact that that guy was in the Navy, just that one fact alone can carry the weight of life, and the juror can give that one mitigating factor. One mitigating factor outweighs all the aggravation the prosecution has presented. That is their right, duty, and obligation to do that. Even if no one else agrees with that guy, his responsibility is to return that legitimate life verdict back into the courtroom. Mitigation does not have to be unanimous. It does not have to be explainable. It can be a connection that the Navy guy had with the defendant who was also in the Navy. A sort of, I understand some of what you've been through. I've been there too. You don't have to be able to prove why you believe a mitigating factor or convince someone else. No.
I think it's a good time to bring up this one.
What's that?
Mercy is never earned. You're not begging for mercy, okay? You never earn mercy. A person doesn't earn mercy. Mitigation is not a presentation of why I deserve mercy. When they're talking about, in sense of mercy or fairness, which is an instructable language within the mitigation phase, well, and mercy comes from the giver, never from the deserver. If you get caught in the trap or the receiver, people receive mercy. People are given mercy, and that's what mitigation is it affects each person's walk of life to determine whether or not they think that I'm choosing life here. I can't explain it. Yeah, you may call it mercy, you may call it whatever else, but mercy presumes he deserves death, but death is never actually required. But I'm just choosing life. Okay. Mercy is why you deserve death. Well, I haven't really qualified that, but you can never get caught in the trap of the DA arguing that he doesn't deserve mercy and he's begging for mercy. And why does he deserve mercy? Well, mercy presumes death. That is an illegal argument, Tammy. I find it offensive.
One way that we've articulated that to the jurors in the sentencing scheme, we say aggravation, that's about the defendant. Or I mean, aggravation, that's about the crime. That's about the murder. Mitigation, that's about the defendant. And the ultimate decision, sentencing decision of life or death, that's about you. That's not about the crime. That's not about the defendant. That's about you and who you choose to kill.
Choose
if anyone, right? So it doesn't have to be explainable. It depends on your own walk of life.
I noticed that within these installation isolation blocks, it's all about choosing life.
Yep.
Isn't that's
we're processing.
We are life processing.
We are life processing. And the message to them is it's not all about the death penalty. This is not just check the boxes, get the death penalty, go home, we're done. This is a decision you have to make, and there is all of this to say about the life sentence.
That when you leave this place, you don't have to look back and say, I should never have killed that person. It allows you to grow and change in your life, right?
Yep.
It protects you as a juror, right? That I don't feel like it's right. If I don't feel it's right, it's life.
Well, and I think one of the best things I've learned from David Wymore through all of this is you have to be strong in the presentation of this stuff. If you, like he says, if you tiptoe in and sort of whisper these concepts, or you don't believe these concepts yourself, you'll just look like a pawn in the game, and they'll do what they think they need. It was always set up for a death verdict. But if you walk in and you are strong, you can be passionate and strong-willed on these concepts of life. Life is not for the weaklings. Life is not for, the ones not strong enough to do this. You have to be the example of a powerful life voice. They're yelling death. Well, I'm going to yell life. And so you need to be the example to the jurors. You're not a weakling if you choose life. You can be a strong-willed, passionate person.
But you're never condemning anybody for their views. You're always just saying, if your view is life, you know, you got to be non-condemning, non-condescending, and non-judgmental. What you are is just saying, if you're a life juror, here are your rights. Here's how it works. Here how it protects you. Right?
Yep.
I mean, you're not sitting there, man, you're a bad person. We're going to cancel you out. I read on your Instagram thing that you said that. You can't be a canceler. You accept all, right? You did a fabulous job of that in Holmes. You accepted everything.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
And so I won't go through the rest of the blocks. You can look through them, I think, they're in your materials. But when you get to the end of all of these blocks, what you do is then tell the life juror how they get their life verdicts back into the courtroom. So you say, so for you, after all of that, for you, once you get to the place where in your heart of hearts, in your individual moral assessment, you've decided a life sentence is appropriate, you need to tell the poor person, hey, will you note on the verdict form that Ms. Brady is done, that Ms. Brady wants it to be a life sentence, and give that to the judge.
Write my verdict on that.
Write my verdict on the form. And if for whatever reason the poor person will not do that, that's right, get up, go knock on the door and tell the bailiff, hey, will you let the judge know Ms. Brady is done deliberating back here. Ms. Brady wants it to be a life sentence, so that gets to the judge, and they're, the jurors will be brought back out into the courtroom, and it will be over, so that your life person doesn't have to stay back there trying to defend or legitimize their vote. But you have to literally tell them the steps so that Peggy knows how to get out. Peggy didn't know to knock on the door.
Peggy didn't know.
Just tell her to knock on the door and bring.
She has a right.
She has a right.
She has a duty. She
Peggy,
has an obligation. So that's it for our hour and a half. Any questions?
Right.
I have none. Do you have any?
I do not have any.
Okay, we have no questions.
All right, you guys, thank you. Stay well and good luck with your cases.